Step aside.
Ma'am, step aside. We need to come in. We're investigating this address.
You have a warrant. You're not coming in.
If you're not hiding anything, this won't be a problem.
I know my rights. No paperwork, no entry.
Turn around. Hands behind your back.
Are you serious right now?
Officers Derek Vane and Marcus Thorne thought it would be a routine pickup, a quick collar on a tattooed woman who fit the profile. But when they cornered Jennifer outside that safe house, the woman they handcuffed wasn't a fugitive. She was an elite Interpol agent in the middle of a multi-million-dollar international operation. And what followed would destroy their careers, dismantle their precinct, and land them both in federal prison for 12 years. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and smash that subscribe button because this story gets absolutely wild, and you won't want to miss how two cops' prejudice cost them everything. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. Please subscribe to Code Blue Verdict Bodycam, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Vane and Thorne had built their reputations the same way, one complaint at a time. They were known in the department as the street justice duo, cops who judged suspects by their appearance and bypassed protocol when they felt like it. Internal affairs files showed a pattern, targeting people with tattoos, assuming criminality based on clothing and body art, using intimidation tactics that skirted the edge of legality. They had been flagged repeatedly, yet somehow they kept their badges, kept their authority, and kept believing they were untouchable. That Wednesday evening, Vane and Thorne were cruising through a quiet residential neighborhood, their patrol car idling at the corner. The sky was gray, threatening rain. They were supposed to be looking for a fugitive, a woman wanted on drug trafficking charges, someone with a distinctive neck tattoo and a history of violence. When they spotted Jennifer stepping out of a nondescript house, her arms covered in intricate ink, wearing dark clothing and moving with purpose, they didn't bother to verify. They just assumed. Vane nodded to Thorne. That's her. Thorne squinted through the windshield. You sure? Look at her, Vane said, his voice dripping with certainty. Tattoos all over, coming out of a known safe house. She fits the description. She didn't, not really. But to Vane and Thorne, one tattooed woman looked like any other. They pulled up alongside Jennifer as she walked toward a parked sedan. Vane stepped out first, his hand already resting on his weapon, his posture aggressive. Thorne followed, flanking her from the other side. Jennifer stopped, her expression neutral, her body language controlled. She had been expecting contact eventually, just not from local cops who had no idea what operation they were about to blow apart. "Ma'am, we need you to step over here," Vane ordered, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Jennifer looked at them, already calculating. She couldn't break cover, not yet, not unless she had no choice. "Is there a problem, officers?" Her voice was calm, measured. Vane's eyes locked on her arms, on the roses and geometric patterns that covered her skin from shoulder to wrist. "Yeah, there's a problem. You match the description of a wanted fugitive. We're going to need to see some ID." What Vane and Thorne didn't know, what they couldn't have known because they never bothered to verify anything, was that Jennifer wasn't a fugitive. She was Agent Jennifer Cross, a deep-cover operative with Interpol, and she had spent 3 years building this identity, earning the trust of an international cartel, getting close enough to take down an operation worth billions. And these two cops, with their assumptions and their egos, were about to ruin everything. Jennifer Cross had been someone else for 3 years, not metaphorically, literally. She had buried her real identity so deep that sometimes she forgot what her actual voice sounded like without the accent. She had forgotten what it felt like to say her real name out loud. For 1,095 days, she had been Jenna, a low-level courier for a transnational drug cartel that moved narcotics, weapons, and human trafficking victims across 4 continents. Her life before this assignment felt like a distant dream. She had been a top graduate from Interpol's training academy in Lyon, France. She spoke 5 languages. She had a master's degree in international criminal justice and a black belt in Krav Maga. She was supposed to be analyzing intelligence reports from a desk in Brussels, living a normal life with friends and family who knew what she did for a living. Instead, she lived in dingy apartments, ate fast food alone, and spent every waking moment pretending to be someone she despised. The mission was simple in theory: infiltrate the cartel's North American network, document their operations, identify key players, and provide evidence for a coordinated multinational takedown. In practice, it meant becoming invisible. It meant getting tattoos to match the cartel's aesthetic, roses for loyalty, geometric patterns that signified rank within their structure. It meant learning their slang, their codes, their rituals. It meant watching crimes happen and doing nothing because intervening would blow her cover and destroy years of work. Tonight was supposed to be the breakthrough. Jennifer had finally earned enough trust to be invited to a planning meeting at a safe house, a meeting where the cartel's regional boss would be present, where financial records would be discussed, where she could gather the final pieces of evidence needed for the operation's climax. She had recorded everything on a device hidden in her jacket. She had names, faces, bank accounts, shipping routes. This was the moment 3 years of sacrifice had been building toward. She stepped out of the safe house feeling the weight of accomplishment and exhaustion. The mission was almost over. In 2 weeks, she could go home. She could be Jennifer Cross again instead of Jenna the courier. She could call her mother, who thought she was working a boring desk job in Vienna. She could sleep without one eye open. She had walked maybe 20 feet when the patrol car pulled up. Derek Vane was 41 years old and had been a cop for 17 years, but he had never learned the difference between policing and bullying. He saw his badge as permission rather than responsibility. He saw the streets as his territory and anyone who looked suspicious as prey. His complaint file was 3 inches thick: accusations of racial profiling, excessive force during traffic stops, intimidation tactics, and unlawful searches. But every complaint had been quietly dismissed by supervisors who valued his aggressive approach to crime reduction, even when that aggression violated constitutional rights. Marcus Thorne was younger, only 33, but he had learned from Vane. They had been partners for 4 years. And in that time, Thorne had adopted every bad habit his mentor had. Together, they had developed a routine: cruise neighborhoods they considered high crime, which really meant neighborhoods with more minorities, look for people who fit their mental profile of criminality and find reasons, any reasons, to make contact, make arrests, and add numbers to their stats. They called it proactive policing. Everyone else called it harassment. Their captain had pulled them aside twice in the past year, warning them to tone it down after particularly egregious incidents. But warnings without consequences meant nothing. Vane and Thorne kept doing what they had always done, confident that the department would protect them. Tonight, they were supposed to be looking for Amanda Reeves, a fugitive with an outstanding warrant for drug trafficking. The description was specific: white female, 29 years old, neck tattoo of a scorpion, scar above her left eyebrow, known to frequent addresses in the industrial district. When they spotted Jennifer, literally none of those details matched. Jennifer was 35. She had no neck tattoo, no scar. She was leaving a residential neighborhood, not the industrial district. But she had tattoos, and to Vane that was enough. "That's our girl," Vane said, already reaching for the door handle. "You think?" Thorne asked, squinting at Jennifer through the windshield. "Doesn't look exactly like the photo." "They never do," Vane said dismissively. "Hair's different, maybe lost some weight, but look at those tats. She's exactly the type." The type, that's how Vane operated. People weren't individuals with rights and identities. They were types. And Jennifer, with her ink and her dark clothing and her presence in a neighborhood Vane had decided was suspicious, fit the type he wanted to arrest. They exited the patrol car with the swagger of men who had never faced real consequences for being wrong. Jennifer assessed the situation in seconds, Two officers, both male, both moving with aggressive body language. Neither had drawn a weapon yet, but both had positioned themselves strategically, one blocking her path forward, one cutting off her retreat. This was an interception, not a casual inquiry. Her training kicked in. First rule of deep cover: stay in character until you absolutely can't. Breaking cover prematurely could endanger not just this operation, but every case connected to it. If these cops started asking questions, ran her fake ID, and then let her go, the cartel would hear about it. They had informants everywhere. They would know she had been stopped by police and released, and that would make them suspicious. Why would the cops let Jenna go unless she was cooperating with them? So Jennifer stayed calm, stayed in character, and prepared for this to go exactly as badly as her instincts were telling her it would. ID, Vane said, not asked. His hand was still resting on his holster, a not-so-subtle threat. Jennifer reached slowly into her jacket pocket and pulled out her wallet. Inside was her cover identity, a driver's license for Jenna Martinez, an address in a different city, and nothing that would connect her to Interpol. She handed it to Vane. Vane barely glanced at it. He was too busy staring at her tattoos, his eyes moving over the roses on her forearm, the geometric patterns on her shoulder. You match the description of a fugitive we're looking for. Amanda Reeves, that you? No, Jennifer said simply. Her accent was perfect, West Coast American, slightly rough around the edges, the kind of voice that suggested a hard life. Never heard of her. That's what they all say, Thorne chimed in, trying to sound tough. He moved closer, invading her personal space. You got any drugs on you? Any weapons? Jennifer's jaw tightened. This was profiling, pure and simple. They had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, just assumptions based on her appearance. No, and you don't have any reason to search me. That was the wrong thing to say. To Vane, asserting rights was the same as admission of guilt. Anyone who knew their rights was someone trying to hide something. Oh, we don't, Vane sneered. Because I smell drugs coming from you. That gives me probable cause to search. The oldest lie in the playbook. Jennifer knew it. Every cop knew it. It was the magic phrase that bypassed the Fourth Amendment because smell was subjective, unprovable, and nearly impossible to challenge in court. Vane didn't smell anything. He was just manufacturing justification for what he had already decided to do. I smell drugs here, Vane announced, loud enough for any witnesses to hear. It was theater, a performance for the Bodycam footage he thought would protect him later. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to place your hands on the vehicle and submit to a search. Jennifer didn't move. Every fiber of her training was screaming at her to comply, to not escalate, to let this play out so she could get back to her mission. But she also knew where this was heading. These cops weren't doing a lawful search. They were fishing. And once they started searching, they might find the recording device hidden in her jacket, the device that contained 3 years of evidence against one of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations. Officer, I don't consent to a search, Jennifer said, her voice steady. You have no probable cause. You're making an assumption based on my appearance, which is illegal profiling. Vane's face reddened. You refusing? I'm asserting my constitutional rights, Jennifer replied. If you want to search me, you need a warrant or actual probable cause, which you don't have. Thorne stepped closer, his hand now on his own weapon. Lady, you're making this real hard on yourself. Just cooperate and this'll be over quick. Jennifer calculated her options. She could break cover right now, reveal her Interpol credentials, and end this before it escalated. But that would compromise the operation. The cartel had people watching. If word got out that Jenna was actually a federal agent, everyone she had worked with for 3 years would disappear, destroy evidence, and flee the country. Months of prosecutorial work would evaporate. Or she could let this play out, take the arrest if necessary, and hope she could contain the damage before her cover was completely blown. She chose wrong. If you're going to arrest me, Jennifer said, but I'm not consenting to any search. Vane smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been given permission to do what he wanted all along. Turn around, hands behind your back. Jennifer complied slowly. She felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around her wrists, tight enough to be uncomfortable. Vane patted her down roughly, his hands invasive and unprofessional, searching her pockets, her jacket, her waistband. When he found the small recording device in her inner jacket pocket, he held it up like a trophy. Well, what's this? Vane asked, turning the device over in his hand. It was small, sleek, expensive, not the kind of thing a low-level criminal would carry. But Vane didn't think that far. He just saw it as validation that he had been right to stop her. Jennifer's heart sank. 3 years. 3 years of work was in that device. And now it was in the hands of 2 cops who had no idea what they were holding. They walked her to the patrol car like she was a trophy, their hands gripping her arms tighter than necessary, their voices loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Jennifer kept her head down, her mind racing. The recording device was gone. The mission was compromised, and she was about to be processed as Jenna Martinez, a fake identity that would fall apart the moment anyone ran a serious background check. A few people had come out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. They watched from their porches as Jennifer was loaded into the back of the patrol car, hands still cuffed behind her back, her tattoos on full display. Vane made a show of it, talking loudly about getting another criminal off the streets, playing to the audience. Jennifer sat in the back seat and stared out the window, her mind already 3 steps ahead. She had a contingency plan for this scenario. A secure phone number she could call that would route to Interpol's Emergency Operations Center. But she needed to get to a phone first, and that meant waiting until they booked her at the station. The drive took 15 minutes. Neither Vane nor Thorne said much, just occasional comments about how Jennifer fit the profile and how they had good instincts. They didn't run her ID through any database. They didn't check whether Amanda Reeves actually had the same tattoos as Jennifer. They didn't do any of the basic police work that would have revealed they had the wrong person. They just assumed they were right, because they always assumed they were right. When they arrived at the precinct, Jennifer was walked through the booking area past other officers, past detectives, past administrative staff. She heard whispers. She saw looks. To everyone watching, she was just another arrest, another tattooed woman who had made bad choices. Nobody questioned whether Vane and Thorne had done their jobs correctly. Nobody asked if the arrest was lawful. In the interrogation room, Vane uncuffed one of Jennifer's hands and cuffed her to the table. Her wrists were bruised from how tight the cuffs had been during the ride. Vane sat across from her, Thorne leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "So Amanda," Vane began, intentionally using the wrong name, "you want to tell us why you ran?" "I didn't run," Jennifer said quietly, "and my name isn't Amanda." "Right," Vane said sarcastically. He pulled out the recording device and set it on the table between them. "Then you want to tell us what this is?" Jennifer stared at the device. 3 years of evidence, 3 years of her life. "I want my phone call." Vane laughed. "You'll get your phone call when we're done here. First, you're going to answer some questions." Jennifer knew her rights. She knew they couldn't deny her access to a phone call indefinitely. But she also knew that bad cops stretch the rules all the time, delaying, intimidating, hopping to break suspects down before they could get legal representation. "I'm invoking my right to remain silent and my right to an attorney," Jennifer said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not answering any questions until I make my phone call." Thorne pushed off the wall. "You think you're smart, huh? Think you know how this works?" Jennifer looked at him, her eyes steady. "I know exactly how this works. You arrested me without probable cause. You searched me without a warrant or consent. And now you're trying to intimidate me into waiving my rights. So yes, I think I know how this works." Vane's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to suspects who fought back verbally, who understood the law better than he did. He stood up, leaning over the table. "You're going to regret this attitude." "And you're going to regret this arrest," Jennifer replied softly. Something in her tone made Vane pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. It was the voice of someone who knew something he didn't. "Fine," Vane said, straightening up. "Make your call, but you're not calling a lawyer. You're calling someone who can explain to you how much trouble you're in." They led her to a phone in the hallway, still handcuffed. Jennifer picked up the receiver and dialed a number she had memorized 3 years ago, a number she had hoped she would never have to use. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Interpol operations, secure line. Authentication code, please." Jennifer turned slightly away from Vane and Thorne and spoke quietly. "Cross, Jennifer. Agent ID November 7 Alpha 42 Echo. Authentication code, broken arrow." Broken arrow. The Interpol code for an operative in critical danger, cover compromised, requiring immediate extraction and federal intervention. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of typing. Then the voice returned, now clipped and urgent. "Confirmed. Agent Cross, maintain your location. Federal response team is being dispatched. Do not engage further. Repeat, do not engage." "Understood," Jennifer said and hung up. She turned back to Vane and Thorne, her expression unreadable. "You should probably call your captain. You're going to need him." Vane frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jennifer said nothing. She just waited, because she knew what was coming next. It took 18 minutes. 18 minutes for 3 black SUVs with federal plates to pull up outside the precinct. 18 minutes for Interpol's U.S. liaison office to coordinate with the FBI and the Department of Justice. 18 minutes for Vane and Thorne's world to start collapsing. The first indication was the commotion in the lobby, raised voices, the desk sergeant stammering, the sound of multiple sets of footsteps marching with purpose. Then the door to the interrogation area burst open, and 6 people in dark suits entered. FBI, U.S. Marshals, and leading them was a woman in her 50s with an Interpol badge clipped to her belt. "Where is Agent Cross?" she demanded. Vane looked up from the interrogation room door, confused. "Who?" "The woman you arrested. Where is she?" "We arrested a fugitive named Amanda Reeves," Vane said, but his confidence was already wavering. "She's in room 3. The Interpol agent, her badge read Director Sarah Kellerman, pushed past him and opened the door to the interrogation room. Jennifer was still sitting at the table, still handcuffed. When she saw Kellerman, she closed her eyes briefly in relief. "Are you injured?" Kellerman asked, her voice softer now. "No, ma'am," Jennifer said, "but my cover is blown. The operation is compromised." Kellerman turned to one of the FBI agents. "Uncuff her, now." The agent complied immediately, releasing Jennifer from the table and removing the handcuffs. Jennifer rubbed her wrists, the bruises already forming. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. Kellerman stepped out into the hallway where Vane and Thorne were standing, their faces pale. The precinct captain had arrived now, looking equally confused and terrified. "Which one of you idiots arrested her?" Kellerman asked, her voice deadly calm. Vane raised his hand slightly. We thought she was Amanda Reeves, a fugitive." "Did you verify that before making the arrest?" "She fit the description." "Did you verify?" Kellerman's words were sharp, each one a dagger. Vane hesitated. "No." "Did you have a warrant?" "No, but we had probable cause." "You had assumptions." Kellerman cut him off. "You saw a woman with tattoos and decided she was a criminal. You didn't check her ID against any database. You didn't confirm she matched the actual fugitive's description. You manufactured probable cause by claiming you smelled drugs, which we both know is a lie. And then you arrested one of Interpol's most valuable deep-cover operatives in the middle of a 3-year international sting operation." The silence that followed was deafening. The captain looked like he might be sick. Vane and Thorne both went from pale to gray. The full scope of what Vane and Thorne had destroyed became clear over the next few hours. Jennifer sat in a conference room with Kellerman and 5 other Interpol agents, going through everything that had been compromised. The cartel meeting she had attended. The participants had scattered within an hour of her arrest, alerted by their informants that Jenna had been picked up by local police. The recording device that contained 3 years of evidence. Seized by Vane without a warrant, making it inadmissible in any court. The financial records, the shipping manifests, the names and faces of key players in a billion-dollar criminal network. All of it useless now because the operation's integrity had been compromised. 3 years. 3 years of living as someone else. 3 years of risking her life daily. 3 years of missing her family, her friends, her actual identity. All destroyed because 2 cops couldn't be bothered to verify a suspect's identity before making an arrest. Jennifer sat at the conference table and stared at her hands, the same hands that had the tattoos she'd gotten to maintain her cover, tattoos she would carry for the rest of her life as reminders of an operation that would never be completed. She felt hollow, not angry yet, just empty. The anger would come later. "How many targets are we losing?" Kellerman asked one of the analysts. "At least 40 confirmed subjects across 6 countries, the analyst replied, reading from a tablet. The primary target, Cesar Molina, went dark immediately. His entire network is shutting down communications. Bank accounts are being drained. Safe houses are being abandoned. We're estimating at least $200 million in drugs and weapons that will now move through alternative channels we don't have access to." Kellerman turned to Jennifer. "I'm sorry, this isn't your fault." Jennifer nodded, but she didn't feel absolved. She had been so close. 2 more weeks and she would have had everything they needed. 2 more weeks and this operation would have taken down one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. Instead, she had nothing. "What happens now?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Now," Kellerman said, her voice hardening, "we make sure those 2 cops pay for what they did. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. This was kidnapping of a federal agent. This was obstruction of justice on an international scale. This was a civil rights violation so egregious that it's going to set legal precedent." Jennifer looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Kellerman replied, "that you're not the only one getting justice here. Every person those 2 officers have ever profiled, every unlawful arrest they've ever made, every lie they've ever told, it's all coming to light. And you're going to be the reason why." The federal investigation into officers Derek Vane and Marcus Thorne took 4 months, but what it uncovered was worse than anyone expected. Jennifer's case was just the beginning. Once federal investigators started digging, they found dozens of complaints that had been dismissed, suppressed, or ignored by the department. They found a pattern of racial profiling that spanned both officers' entire careers. They found evidence of fabricated probable cause in at least 20 arrests. They found instances where Vane and Thorne had coerced confessions, planted evidence, and lied in police reports. The Department of Justice charged both officers with deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping of a federal officer, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The charges were federal, which meant no sympathetic local jury, no department protection, no friendly judges. This was the big leagues, and Vane and Thorne were facing decades in prison. Jennifer filed a separate civil rights lawsuit for $15 million, $5 million in compensatory damages for the destruction of her 3-year operation, $5 million for the emotional and psychological trauma of being arrested and humiliated while maintaining deep cover, and $5 million in punitive damages to send a message that profiling has consequences. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the federal judge, a black woman who had no patience for racist cops, addressed Vane and Thorne directly. "You were given badges and the public's trust," she said, her voice cold and measured. You were supposed to protect and serve. Instead, you targeted people based on their appearance, manufactured evidence to justify your prejudices, and operated as if the Constitution didn't apply to you. When you arrested Agent Cross, you didn't just ruin an international investigation. You revealed yourselves as exactly the kind of officers who erode public trust in law enforcement. She sentenced each of them to 12 years in federal prison, no parole, no reduced sentences for good behavior, 12 years to think about what their assumptions had cost them. The civil case settled before trial. The city's insurance, facing the overwhelming evidence and the federal convictions, agreed to pay Jennifer the full $15 million. She donated $10 million of it to organizations that provided legal defense for victims of police profiling and wrongful arrests. The rest she kept, not because she needed the money, but because it represented something larger than herself: accountability. 6 months after the sentencing, Jennifer sat in a small cafe in Vienna, her real hair color grown back, her tattoos covered by long sleeves. She was drinking coffee and reading a newspaper when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kellerman: new operation, different cartel, same mission, interested. Jennifer stared at the message for a long time. She thought about the 3 years she had lost. She thought about Vane and Thorne in their cells. She thought about all the victims whose cases had been overturned because of the investigation her arrest had triggered, people who had been wrongly convicted, whose lives had been destroyed by 2 cops' prejudices. She typed back a single word: yes. Because the work wasn't done. It never would be. But at least now, when she went back undercover, she would know that officers like Vane and Thorne were where they belonged, behind bars where their badges couldn't protect them anymore.